CollabTalk is a copyright of Collaborative ABA Services, making a difference in children's lives.
Hi everyone, welcome to CollabTalk, a new talk series by Collaborative ABA Services that provides information and resources about autism and everything in between. I am Alicia, the Executive Clinical Director and founder of Collaborative ABA Services, and with me I have an amazing team.
My name's Katie, I'm an occupational therapist.
I'm Bree, I'm a BCBA.
I'm Meg, I'm a licensed social worker and registered behavior technician.
So today, we're going to be talking about creating inclusive environments for individuals with autism, an important conversation around inclusion and support for our neurodiverse community. So first thing is, what is inclusion? Because we say inclusion or inclusive all the time. So inclusion refers to the ability to provide equal access to resources and opportunities regardless of differences. So it relates to our discussion today regarding individuals with autism, as we know that autism can bring unique challenges as well as different strengths across different individuals. So please note, again, our wonderful disclaimer. This episode is not intended to critique or endorse any specific providers or businesses. Our goal is to simply educate and empower the community and provide information and resources. So team, let's get started. First and foremost, I have to say, again, that autism is a spectrum disorder,
Right.
meaning that characteristics may vary across individuals, so no two individuals are the same. So let's get right into the common traits of autism. What are some common traits of autism an individual may have?
So there is differences in communication and social interactions. That's like a big one that is typically noticed.
I'd say rigidity, difficulty with changes in routine or wanting to be on a specific routine.
Unexpected, things that kind of interrupt those routines.
And then also like those very focused interests, right?
Yeah.
And the deep expertise in specific topics that might appear unusual, right?
Yeah.
For someone are some common traits in autism. So the next thing is talk about barriers to inclusion, right? Because we know that we hear about creating inclusive environments, but what are some barriers that you guys see that occur?
I think one of the challenges, depending on the environment, is the ability to implement those modifications.
Yeah,
so I think
right.
a lot of times, like if I'm thinking of like a school setting, for example, if we're talking about a sensory diet or a strategy for an individual, the teacher might have challenges implementing that for one and not for everybody, or trying to implement it for everybody, but it doesn't really address or support that one. So I think kind of thinking about what is realistic in that environment to implement what works best for that person.
Almost like a lack of understanding or even knowing that they're doing it too, right? So like more of those like educational opportunities so that way everyone understands how to be more inclusive, right? With all
And
those things.
yeah, and also too, like we were talking about like some of the difficulties someone with autism might have, right?
Yeah.
Also, like if someone doesn't understand what autism is, they might, misinterpret the behaviors, which can lead to like personal biases or judgments. Is one of the major ones. Like I'll give you an example. You might have a kid that's like having a whole meltdown in a grocery store, and everyone's staring at the kid and they're like, oh, this kid has behavior issues, this parent can't control your
Why are
kid.
they letting their kid do that?
Right.
Yeah.
And not realizing, hey, this kid has special needs, and maybe the kid is having a meltdown because they have sensory or sensitivities to loud noises.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that the child is trying to be, misbehaving or difficult. It's because they're, experiencing some big feelings, emotions that they can't really, express.
And I think that's one of the challenges with autism is, like you mentioned, it's a spectrum, so it kind of has different, everybody looks different and everybody has different, strengths and challenges, but I think that it's not a physical disability, so you're not often going to see a child with autism in a wheelchair or a child using, kind of, any kind of like supports or having braces or something like that. So like you mentioned right off the bat, if you're, in the community and you aren't, you see a child who's having a challenge, it's going to look very similar to, say, a neurotypical child having a meltdown because it is a social behavioral deficit. So I think that sometimes that can also be a barrier in and of itself because it doesn't look like something is, different. It just looks like the child's having some challenges. So I think that can also be hard for some people to recognize that, oh, but they're okay. I was like, well, yeah, but it's a totally different type of support that they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also, when you have a kid that's acting out, right? Now, another barrier is, unintentional exclusion,
Yes.
right? From teams or activities because the kid has, might have behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they might say, hey, this child can't be in our restaurant or this child, we don't want this child at our facility because he has behavior difficulties. So now they're excluding this kid, right? So that's another barrier to inclusion because, it goes back to lack of understanding and awareness.
Yeah.
So the next thing to talk about is, what are some principles of inclusive environments or some things to kind of consider when we're looking at inclusion?
I think I mentioned it before, but like awareness, right? Educating teams about autism and neurodiversity, breaking it down, like the stereotypes and some of those different common traits to kind of bring awareness and more acceptance.
I think like adaptability and flexibility, but also I think patience. Like I think that if you're going to promote an inclusive environment and you're going to have individuals that have some challenges, they may not, do the right thing or get it right away. So being okay with continuing to extend that hand and continuing to have that openness so that the flexibility and that adaptability continues to be supported, because it's not just going to be immediately like successful. Sometimes you might need to kind of give it more than one try.
Right.
I think with the awareness too, in the community, in school, across settings, with like the awareness aspect is kind of understanding like when a child is having a difficult time, like should I offer help?
What to do?
Like offering help and just kind of understanding like if they say no, thank you, or accept the help, like when is it appropriate to offer and also being denied.
Right.
So I think a lot goes into that too, just kind of across settings.
Yeah.
Because I know I've seen it.
Yeah.
We've all seen a kid have a meltdown, and I sit there, I think, do they need help?
Yeah.
I think they have.
You make eye contact with a parent, you're like, you need me? No? Okay, good. Gotcha.
Right. Yeah.
And then also inclusive environments should have clarity, right? Like providing those clear expectations, those consistent routines, and also, providing communication or different methods of communication, whether it be visual, in addition to auditory, because as we know and as we mentioned in the past, that individuals with autism do very well with visuals, right? So visual communication and also accessibility, like, creating like maybe some sensory-friendly lighting, right? Providing maybe some quiet areas for those kiddos that like might struggle with loud noises. Or again, it goes back to the visual aids, right? Can be part of like an inclusive environment.
Yeah, and I think as a parent, if you have a younger child and you're interested in taking them to community outings or doing something, you can call the place that you can call the museum, you can call the amusement park, you can call the place that you want to take your child to and say, hey, like my child has some sensory challenges. Do you guys have quieter spaces? What kind of adaptations do you guys make? And most of the time, even if they don't advertise it on their website or say like we're a sensory friendly place, they do make accommodations. Like you probably are not the first person to ask if they have anything to help support somebody.
So next thing to talk about is practical ways to foster inclusion, right? Because you talked about earlier, right, how sometimes it could be difficult to implement those accommodations. So let's talk about like practical ways that different settings can support inclusion. So first one is workplaces, which is huge, right?
Yeah.
What are some things that workplaces or employers can do to foster inclusion?
Maybe using like clear written expectations of what is expected of the employee.
Right.
I think visuals you mentioned, like individuals with autism do really well with visuals. So having things that may be, spoken or written being like, visually appealing or kind of have those supports to help that person understand it.
I think like kind of like seating arrangement too. I know a lot of companies have like those big floor plan cubicle type of designs, and if you are aware of like their sensitivities, maybe assigning them an area that's a little closer to the exit so they can remove themselves quicker if they need to, or around coworkers that you notice kind of have more of that awareness and inclusivity and those sort of supports.
Or like a quieter area, maybe not like near like the big office room or something.
Right.
And also, I think flexibility is huge. You know, we can't, as employers, be very rigid and say, these are the hours, and, you know, there's no music allowed, or, you know, you can't have this. It's kind of like being also flexible. In our hours, or being flexible in general about the environment. And also, like, when we're being flexible, that also means, you know, allowing the individuals, if they have noise canceling headphones to, or, you know, earbuds to wear them. It doesn't mean that they're ignoring their job. It might just be like a discreet way for them to kind of cope with some of those sensory challenges, or if they want to sit in an area that has, you know, a lower level of lighting. So, you know, definitely being flexible. So we talked about workplaces. Next space, how about schools or training settings?
I think continuing to kind of look at like incorporating those structured routines and having those things that help individuals be more successful. I think that, like we mentioned in some of the other talks that we've had, if an individual with autism knows what's going to happen or has some more understanding of it, they're less uncomfortable and they're more likely to be successful.
Right.
And as we continue to mention, I feel like is giving it out in different modalities. So like, okay, it's written, it's up visually, it's spoken, having those trainings kind of in all different ways, depending on how the learner is most successful.
Yeah, and also it goes back to what we said, the same thing in the workplace about, you know, altering the environment. So that means, like in a classroom setting, if I know that Johnny has a hard time with, you know, loud noises or distractions, I might strategically alter his seat in an area that might be a little quieter and has less distractions. So I, you know, that's a big piece too that can apply, I think, across all settings. So the next space is community settings. So what are some things in the community settings?
I think one of the bigger things I've seen pretty consistently is like those sensory-friendly hours for certain like museums or movie nights and stuff, and I think that those things really focus on having them be at times that are less busy, and having them be at times when families are able to bring their children, and it isn't as rushed, it isn't as hurried, so they're able to have the time to do that, because I do think that with some of those sensory preferences or challenges, they might want to spend more time on one thing than another, or they might want to get up and move instead of being sedentary during a movie. So I think that those things really kind of are flexible to that.
Right. And it kind of goes back to what Bree, you were saying earlier about like training staff, right? About the awareness in the community settings. It promotes inclusion, it promotes acceptance, it makes people, you know, feel good, customers as well as staff, because they're like, oh, this feels a little bit great, because now they feel like they're being more supportive. And it creates an environment where everyone, you know, may feel welcome.
I think that goes for like HR too, not even just like the everyday like employee, because, you know, if you have questions and you go to HR, they'll understand how you kind of need it spelled out, like how you need it explained. Like you said, the different modalities of communication.
Right. So overall in the community, and then you were talking about like when they're going out in the community, they can call places in advance. And I can kind of say too that I actually went to a designated, I'm not going to say the name, of a amusement park. And I was pleasantly surprised to find that, you know, they did, you know, provide an inclusive environment for individuals with disabilities, including autism. And they actually had visuals, right, that kind of showed different levels of sensories, as well as they had quiet areas that families could use if their kids was getting overstimulated. So I was pleasantly surprised, because I can imagine, you know, like having kids that are on the spectrum, and then, you know, feeling, you know, accepted and welcoming. That makes a huge difference in the community.
It's less stressful too for a parent, I think, because I imagine like taking your children out in the community, regardless of whether they're neurotypical or not, it can be difficult. So I think knowing that, okay, if I go to this place and my kid has a tough time, there's some place they can be, or if I go to this place and I need to do something, I need some modifications or something that's going to be available, it's just really nice, because it's, as you know, as somebody who is, you know, neurotypical to some degree, I don't think about how difficult it is to go to those things, and I take some things for granted. Like I can go to the, you know, the zoo with my nieces, and I don't really think about that, versus somebody who has a child with autism, it's a whole nother world. It's a very different barrier. So I think
it's stressful and it almost unenjoyable, I would say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where those opportunities and accommodations make it more enjoyable for everyone, right? And more enjoyable for the child, most especially, you know?
Right.
Yeah, and with travel too.
Yes.
Travel can be tricky, but you can call airlines and, you know, be last on, first off.
Right.
And, you know, that they have that one cup that they just have to drink out of.
Yeah.
You know, if you call ahead, security's going to let them through with the cup.
Right.
You get all the, you know, fine things kind of tuned out. That will just make it a little bit smoother.
Right.
Just calling and asking the questions.
Might be a little bit more work in the beginning, but overall it makes it a little bit more successful for everybody.
I feel like there's kind of more inclusion than some are aware of.
Yeah.
If you just ask.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So looking at the bigger picture, you know, of inclusion, we know that inclusion really is a continuous process. It's not a checklist, but it's something that, you know, we're continuing to improve as, you know, people become more educated and aware of the different needs. And also, when environments are designed to support people with autism, they often become better for everyone.
Yes.
And, you know, it makes the environment and it makes the settings more thoughtful, right? More human and also more equitable. And that's where the goal to making everyone feel welcome, right? So, call to action, or what are some things that, you know, we can do to help promote inclusion in the community?
I think education is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times some of the things that are the biggest barriers to inclusivity are based around lack of understanding or lack of awareness. So I think the more education, the more acceptance-based, you know, information we can provide to people, I think improves the, you know, comfort level for people in the community, and then also for those individuals with autism knowing that they can have access to things that may not have been previously available.
And I think, you know, for people that are in the community, whether they are in a school setting, amusement parks, restaurants, businesses, you know, maybe do a self-assessment and ask, like, what can I do to make my space more inclusive? And do like a personal, you know, assessment. And I find that that can also be helpful as well, because sometimes people don't realize that, you know, their environment is not really inclusive. Any other things that people can do?
Be kind.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Goes a long way.
It does.
Yeah. And patient, like what you were saying earlier. So, you know, inclusion is not just about, you know, welcoming people. It's about making sure that, you know, those people can thrive. And also, you know, we're saying inclusion for autism, but really it's inclusion for everyone with disabilities.
For anybody,
Yeah. So, any other key takeaways from today's talk? Or did we kind of narrow everything down?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of CollabTalk. If you found this information valuable, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and also hit the bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, let's keep this conversation going. And by the way, I forgot, if you have any questions or comments, please don't forget to drop those comments. We love to hear from you. Until next time again, like I said before, let's keep this conversation going. To learn more about Collaborative ABA Services, check out our website at www.collaborativaaservices.com and additional social media pages such as Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and
TikTok.
Bye.
CollabTalk is a copyright of Collaborative ABA Services, making a difference in children's lives.